By the time my mother said, if she had done something with her life, I wouldn't have to explain her to people. There were 31 relatives at the Thanksgiving table pretending not to hear her clearly. But they all heard it. They heard the little pause before her, the way she lifted her wine glass like she was making a joke no one was brave enough not to laugh at. They heard my sister's engagement ring click softly against her water glass. They heard my aunt suck in a breath and look down at the sweet potatoes like they had suddenly become fascinating. They heard me set my fork down without a sound. And then they looked at me the way people look at someone they've already decided they understand. The dropout, the disappointment, the daughter who never quite became anything worth bringing up with pride. What none of them knew, what my mother definitely didn't know, was that the life she had spent 7 years shrinking into a dinner table cautionary tale had already outgrown that room. The truth was on its way to us. It just hadn't walked in yet. If quiet strength means something to you, subscribe. Some stories don't shout when they change your life, they just stay with you. That night should have been about my sister. That was how my mother had planned it. Meredith had the law degree, the polished fiancé, the kind of future my parents could display without explanation. I had a gray sweater, a calm face, and a family reputation built almost entirely out of omissions. I didn't always look like the one who failed. In March of 2017, I was 22 years old, a junior at the University of Connecticut, majoring in computer science with a GPA. I had earned the hard way through late nights, cheap coffee, and the kind of discipline no one ever compliments because it isn't dramatic. I wasn't the smartest person in the department, I just kept showing up. That version of my life ended at 2:04 a.m. on a Tuesday. My phone rang in the dark. Not my mother, not my father. It was my grandmother's neighbor in Bridgeport. "Leah, honey," Ruth Alvarez whispered, voice shaking. "It's Mrs. Donnelly. Your grandma collapsed in the kitchen. The ambulance just left." I was already out of bed before she finished speaking. And I had no idea that one phone call was about to split my life into the version they told people, and the version I actually lived. I don't remember putting my shoes on. I remember my hands shaking so hard I missed the laces twice. I remember my roommate sitting up in bed asking, "What's wrong?" And me saying, "My grandma," like that explained everything, which, somehow, it did. I called my mother first. It rang longer than it should have for a house where someone is always awake, always prepared, always in control. When she finally answered, her voice was tight with irritation, not concern. "Leah, it's 2 in the morning. Grandma had a stroke," I said. "She's at Street Vincent's. I'm going now." There was a pause. Not the kind where someone processes fear. The kind where someone calculates inconvenience. "She's 80, my mother said. "That's what happens. I have a deposition in the morning. Call your sister." And then she hung up. No questions. No. "Is she conscious?" No. "Do you need help?" Just a quiet, clean disconnection, like I had called about something minor and poorly timed. I stood there in the hallway for half a second longer than I should have, staring at my phone like it might correct itself. It didn't. So I called Meredith. She picked up faster, which somehow made it worse. "I can't, Leah," she said before I even finished explaining. "I have bar prep. If I fall behind now, I'm done. You know how Mom is about this." "It's Grandma," I said, softer this time. Not arguing, just stating something I thought still mattered. "I know," she said, "but what am I supposed to do from here?" The question sat there between us, and the answer, whether she meant it or not, was simple. Nothing. I drove 4 hours in the dark alone. No music, no podcast, just the low hum of the highway and the sound of my own breathing trying not to turn into something else. If you've ever had a moment where everything changes and no one shows up but you know how quiet that kind of drive is. The hospital lights were too bright when I got there, the kind of fluorescent that makes everything feel unreal. My grandmother, Elena Alvarez, was in the ICU, machines doing the work her body hadn't decided if it could still do on its own. The left side of her body was still. Her hand didn't move when I touched it, but her eyes opened. And when they found mine, something in my chest steadied just enough to keep going. She squeezed my fingers once. Just once. And then she tried to speak through the oxygen mask. I leaned in close. She said something I didn't understand right away, not because it was unclear, but because I wasn't ready to hear it yet. I'll tell you what she said later. Because that sentence was the first thing in this story that actually told the truth. The hospital social worker met me just after sunrise. She had a clipboard, a calm voice, and the kind of practiced empathy that tells you she's had this conversation 1,000 times before. "Your grandmother is stable," she said, "but recovery from a stroke like this, it's not quick." I nodded like I understood. "I didn't. Not yet." "She'll need rehabilitation," the woman continued. "Physical therapy 3 times a week, assistance with mobility, meals, hygiene, possibly long-term." She handed me a folder. Inside were numbers, real ones. Home care aides, $38 to $45 an hour. Rehab programs with waiting lists. Medication estimates that didn't care how much someone loved you. I stared at the page long enough for the numbers to stop feeling like numbers and start feeling like weight. "Does she have family support?" the social worker asked gently. I almost said yes. Instead I said, "She has me." And something in her eyes softened not with relief, but with recognition, like she knew exactly what that meant. By Monday, I was sitting across from my academic advisor. Professor Halpern had the same coffee stain on his sleeve he'd probably had for years. He listened without interrupting while I explained everything: the stroke, the hospital, the costs, the reality that no one else was stepping in. When I finished, he didn't rush to fill the silence. "Leah," he said finally, "you've worked very hard to be here." I swallowed. "I know. A leave of absence doesn't erase that," he continued. "It just pauses it." I looked at the form on his desk. Leave of absence. Temporary. Return expected. It looked simple on paper. It didn't feel simple anywhere else. "If I leave," I asked quietly, "do people usually come back?" He didn't lie. "Some do," he said. "Some don't." That was the first honest answer I'd gotten in days. I signed the paperwork anyway. Packed my life into 4 boxes. Left behind a version of myself that had a clear path and a name people understood when they asked, "What do you do?" On the drive to Bridgeport, my phone stayed silent. No one checked if I made it. No one asked what I needed. And maybe that's when something in me shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that would matter later. Because when no one shows up long enough, you stop waiting. I moved into my grandmother's apartment that week. The hospital bed took up half the living room. The air smelled faintly like antiseptic and lavender. And every morning I woke up knowing the same thing. There was no backup plan. Just me. And a life that didn't look anything like the one I had left behind. I called my mother the night I moved in. Not because I expected help, just because some part of me still believed she should know. "I'm staying with Grandma," I said, standing in the kitchen while Elena slept in the next room. "Full time. She can't manage on her own yet." There was a pause on the line, then a slow exhale. Not relief. Not concern. Assessment. "Don't tell anyone," she said. I blinked. "What?" "I don't want the family thinking we can't take care of our own," she continued. "You know how people talk." I looked through the doorway at my grandmother. Her left hand rested awkwardly on the blanket, fingers curled in a way they hadn't been before. "This is taking care of our own," I said quietly. My mother's voice flattened. "The truth is, you're leaving school, Leah. That's what they need to know." I felt it then. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. More permanent. "I'm not quitting," I said. "I'm choosing. Call it whatever helps you sleep," she cut in. "But don't embarrass the family trying to explain it." And then, just like before, she hung up. I stood there for a long time with the phone still in my hand. There are moments when you realize a conversation isn't just a disagreement. It's a decision. She had already decided who I was going to be in her version of the story. And it didn't include the truth. I could have fought her right then. I could have called every relative, explained everything, corrected the narrative before it had time to spread. But in the next room, Elena shifted in her bed. A soft, strained sound escaped her throat, the kind she tried to hide when something hurt. And suddenly, the choice felt different, not smaller, clearer. I put my phone down, not because my mother was right, because my grandmother needed quiet more than I needed to be understood. If you've ever had to choose between defending yourself and protecting someone you love, you know that kind of silence isn't weakness. It's a trade. The first few weeks were a blur of routines I had to learn fast. Medication schedules taped to the fridge. Physical therapy exercises written in careful handwriting by someone who wouldn't be there when they actually mattered. Helping Elena sit up. Stand. Try. Fail. Try again. She never complained. Not once. But I saw it in the way her jaw tightened, in the way her eyes closed just a second too long after each movement. One night, after I helped her into bed, she looked at me differently. Not like I was helping her. Like she was measuring something. "You're tired," she said. "I'm fine," I replied automatically. She didn't argue. She just kept looking at me. And then she nodded once. Like she understood something I hadn't said out loud yet. That this wasn't temporary. And that somewhere along the way, I had already started paying a price no one else even noticed. The 4th of July barbecue was at my Aunt Carol's house that year. I almost didn't go. Not because I didn't want to see everyone, but because I already knew how it would feel before I even walked through the gate. That quiet shift in the air. The way conversations tilt when you become the topic people have already discussed without you. But Elena wanted to go. So I helped her into the car, folded her wheelchair into the trunk, and drove the 40 minutes in silence. When we got there, the backyard was full kids running through sprinklers, paper plates stacked high with food, laughter floating over the smell of grilled corn and charcoal. It looked normal. That was the first warning. Because normal only works when the story underneath it is true. We were 40 minutes late. I'd been doing Elena's afternoon stretches, the ones that made her grip the armrest and whisper curses under her breath like she was negotiating with her own body. When I pushed her through the side gate, I felt it instantly. The shift. It's subtle when you're the one it's happening to. People look at you a second too long. Then not long enough. Smiles that don't quite land. My Aunt Carol was the first to reach us. She touched my arm gently. "Leah, honey, are you okay? Your mom told us." There it was. I didn't even need to ask what she'd told them. I glanced across the yard. My mother stood near the drink table, dabbing the corner of her eye with a napkin, surrounded by two of my aunts. She looked up just long enough to catch my gaze, then looked away like she couldn't bear it, like I was the one who had hurt her. "That's not exactly what happened," I said carefully. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just tried to exist inside the truth. Elena needed... "Leah, please." My mother's voice cut across the yard, soft enough to sound fragile, loud enough to carry. "Not here. Not today." Every head turned, not toward her, toward me. And just like that, the roles locked into place. She was protecting the moment. I was the one threatening it. If you've ever tried to explain yourself in a room that already decided who you are, you know how fast your words start to feel unnecessary. I closed my mouth. Behind me, Elena reached up from her wheelchair and squeezed my wrist. Just once. The same way she had in the hospital. Not to stop me. To steady me. I spent the rest of the afternoon at the edge of the yard with a paper plate I never touched, listening to conversations that didn't include me but were quietly about me. When we got back to the car, my phone buzzed. A message from Meredith. "Mom's really upset. Why do you always have to make everything about yourself?" I read it once. Then again. Then I turned the screen off and placed the phone in the glove compartment. Some of you listening know this exact moment. When you realize, it's not just one person telling the story anymore. It's spreading, and you're the only one not invited to correct it. I drove Elena home without turning the radio on. And for the first time, the silence didn't just feel heavy. It felt occupied. Like something had moved in, and it wasn't leaving anytime soon. 6 months later, Elena was stronger. Not the way people imagine recovery, no dramatic moment where everything returns all at once, but steady, quiet progress. She could transfer from the bed to the chair on her own most days. She could hold a mug without it slipping. She argued with the television again, which felt like a victory no doctor could measure. And at night, after she fell asleep, I started building something. It began small. Online courses, free ones at first, then paid when I could afford them. Python, JavaScript, data structures. I turned the kitchen table into a desk, and the silence into something useful. From 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. every night. No one knew. No one asked. That became the pattern. Days belonged to Elena. Nights belonged to me. If you've ever rebuilt your life in hours no one sees, you understand how strange it feels to exist in two versions of yourself at once. One visible, one real. Then, one afternoon, something shifted. A small software company in Hartford posted an internship, no degree required. That part stopped me. No degree required. I read the listing 3 times, like it might disappear if I looked away too quickly. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a big-name company, but it was real. I applied. Didn't overthink it. Didn't tell anyone. A week later, they called. Her name was Paula Reynolds. Hiring manager. Calm voice, sharp questions. She didn't seem concerned that I had taken a leave from school. She cared about what I knew, what I could build, what I understood. At the end of the interview, she smiled. "You're exactly the kind of self-starter we need." No one had ever said that to me before. Not like that. Not without a qualifier attached. I got the offer 2 days later. I read the email standing in the kitchen, Elena watching me over her glasses while stirring her tea. "Well?" she asked. "I got it," I said. She nodded once. "Of course you did." That was it. No overreaction. No surprise. Just certainty. For a moment, I let myself feel it. Not excitement exactly. Relief. Like maybe, just maybe, the version of me I had been building at night was about to step into daylight. I was supposed to start the following Monday. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Paula. Her tone was different. Careful. Measured. "Leah," she said. "I'm really sorry. We've received some concerning information." My chest tightened. "What kind of information?" A pause. "Someone from your family contacted us," she said. "They expressed concerns about your reliability." The room went completely still. I didn't ask who. I already knew. Because there are moments in life where the truth doesn't arrive as a surprise. It arrives as confirmation. And in that moment, standing in the same kitchen where I had spent months rebuilding myself in silence, I realized something else. This wasn't just misunderstanding anymore. Someone had reached into my life and tried to close a door I had just barely managed to open. I didn't cry. Not right away. I thanked Paula for telling me, said I understood even though I didn't, and ended the call like it was a normal conversation about something small. Then I just stood there. The kitchen looked the same. The table. The chair. Elena's teacup still resting in her hand. But something had shifted in a way I couldn't undo. Because it wasn't just that I lost the internship, it was how I lost it. Not because I failed. Not because I wasn't ready. Because someone decided I shouldn't be allowed to try. I grabbed my keys before I could think too much about it. "I'll be back," I told Elena. She didn't ask where I was going. She just watched me. The way she always did when she knew I was about to learn something the hard way. My mother was on her front porch when I got there, watering the rosemary like it was just another afternoon. Like nothing in the world had been touched. "Did you call my internship?" I asked. No greeting. No build-up. Just the truth, placed between us. She didn't even flinch. "I don't know what you're talking about." I stepped closer. "Someone from my family told them I wasn't reliable." She set the watering can down slowly. "Looked at me the way you look at someone who keeps asking the wrong question. Maybe they just didn't want you," she said. Calm. Even. Controlled. "Did you think about that?" The words landed clean. Too clean. Like she had practiced them. "Not everyone is going to hand you things, Leah." And then she turned, walked inside, and let the screen door close behind her. Just like that. Conversation over. Reality denied. Narrative intact. I stood on that porch longer than I should have. Long enough for the anger to come. Then pass. Then settle into something else. Something quieter. If you've ever realized the person hurting you will never admit it, you know that strange kind of stillness. It's not closure. It's clarity. When I got back to Elena's apartment, the lights were dim. She was in the living room, awake, waiting. Not watching TV. Not reading. Just there. I sat at the kitchen table without saying anything. Didn't need to. She wheeled herself in slowly and stopped across from me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You went to her." I nodded. "And?" I looked down at my hands. She said it wasn't her. Elena didn't react. Not surprise. Not anger. Just a small, almost invisible shift in her expression. Like a piece of a puzzle had settled into place. She studied me for a moment longer than usual, then leaned back slightly in her chair. Quiet. Thinking. I thought she was just processing what I'd said. I didn't know. Not yet. That in that same house, in that same silence, someone had already started keeping records. And one day, those records would matter more than anything I could have said out loud. Rock bottom doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a studio apartment with a radiator that won't stop clanking, a window facing a brick wall, and a bank account number you start memorizing because it keeps getting smaller. I was 24. Rent was $650 a month, Freelance work paid anywhere from $15 to $20 an hour if the client didn't argue about it. A bakery website in Milford. A landscaping company in Shelton. A dentist office that needed an online booking form but also wanted something modern without knowing what that meant. It wasn't nothing, but it wasn't enough. Elena's Social Security covered her rent. Not her medication. Her blood thinners alone were over $300 a month. I covered the rest. Every time. Without asking anyone. Without anyone asking me. If you've ever been the one quietly carrying something no one else even notices, you know how heavy manageable can feel. The number in my savings account sat at $1,140 for weeks. Then it dropped. Then it dropped again. It never went up. But somehow, that still wasn't the worst part. The worst part was Thanksgiving. Every year, I went. Not because I wanted to. Because Elena wanted to. Because she loved those gatherings in a way that didn't depend on how she was treated. So I showed up. Every time. And every time, it was the same. My mother's soft sigh when someone asked about me. The way her face would change subtle, practiced like she was carrying something difficult on my behalf. "We're just glad she's here," she'd say, patting my hand like I was something fragile she had to manage. Then she'd turn to Meredith, and everything would brighten. Junior partner track, top of her class. Craig's family is wonderful. The contrast wasn't loud. That's what made it effective. It didn't need to be. The room filled in the blanks on its own. And the relatives, they weren't cruel. That's the part people don't always understand. They were kind, polite, concerned, which somehow made it worse. Because they believed her. Not because they wanted to hurt me. Because the first story they heard made the most sense. I stopped correcting it. At some point, explaining yourself over and over in the same room starts to feel like arguing with gravity. You just learn where things fall. But inside that small apartment late at night, something else was happening. After Elena went to sleep, after the dishes were done, after the world stopped asking anything from me, I opened my laptop, and I built. Not loudly, not publicly, just consistently. A logistics tool for small freight companies. Something simple at first. Something useful. I tested it with a trucking company in New Haven. The owner called me after 2 weeks. "This thing saved me 11 hours, he said. I sat there with the phone in my hand. 11 hours. Not praise. Not validation. Something better. Proof. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the version of me they talked about at dinner tables. I felt accurate. And that changed something. Not all at once, but enough to make one quiet decision. I didn't need them to understand what I was building. I just needed to keep building it. And for the first time, silence didn't feel like something being done to me. It felt like something I could use. The night I decided to take it seriously, nothing dramatic happened. No breakthrough moment. No sudden confidence. Just me, sitting at my kitchen table at 1:12 a.m., staring at my laptop while the radiator clicked behind me like it was counting something down. The logistics tool was open on my screen. I'd been adding features, slowly dispatch tracking, route optimization, small things that made a real difference if you were actually using it. The trucking company in New Haven had been using it for a month now. They hadn't stopped. That mattered. I leaned back in my chair and looked at it not like something I made to survive, but like something that might actually stand on its own. And a thought came in quietly. This is good. Not perfect. Not revolutionary. But good enough to grow. Good enough to become something real if I stopped treating it like a side project and started treating it like a responsibility. If you've ever had a moment where you realize no one is coming to validate what you're building, you know how different that decision feels. It's not loud. It's final. I didn't announce it. Didn't tell anyone. I just opened a new tab and filed the paperwork. LLC registration. Name: Juniper Systems. Juniper was Elena's middle name. Systems sounded bigger than what it was. That helped. I didn't register it under Leah Bennett. I used Parker. Elena's maiden name. Leah Parker. On paper, it disconnected me from everything my family believed about me. Not because I was ashamed, because I had already seen how easily visibility could be used against me. One phone call had taken away my internship. I wasn't going to give anyone that kind of access again. When I told Elena, it wasn't some big moment. We were at the kitchen table. Scrambled eggs. toast slightly burned on one side. Her medication lined up next to her glass of orange juice. "I'm starting a company," I said. She didn't react right away, just looked at me over her glasses. "Took you long enough." I smiled despite myself. "I can't tell anyone," I added. "Not Mom, not Meredith, no one." "Good," she said, reaching for her fork. "Then no one can ruin it." There was no speech, no encouragement speech, just understanding. And somehow, that was exactly what I needed. A week later, she called me into her bedroom. She had a shoebox in her lap, old, worn at the edges. The kind people keep things in that matter. "Open it," she said. Inside were a few photographs, some old cards, and an envelope. She pulled out a check, $3,200. I stared at it. "Elena, this is everything." "I know what it is," she said calmly. "I can't take this." She reached for my hand. Her grip wasn't as strong as it used to be, but it didn't need to be. "I didn't raise you to be small, Leah." The room went quiet. "Take it," she said, "and build something that doesn't ask anyone for permission." I held the check in my hand longer than I expected to, because in that moment, it wasn't just money. It was the first time someone had invested in me, without needing me to prove I was worth it first. I bought a server before I bought anything else. Not furniture, not better clothes, not even a new chair to replace the folding one that made my back ache after a few hours. A server. Because if I was going to do this, I wasn't going to do it halfway. I set everything up in Elena's spare bedroom, the one that still smelled faintly like lavender and old books. The desk was uneven. The Wi-Fi cut out if too many devices were on at once, but it worked. That was enough. My days didn't change. I still woke up early, helped Elena through her routines, cooked, cleaned, drove her to physical therapy, listened when she needed to talk. But my nights became something else entirely. Structured, focused, relentless. 16-hour days weren't impressive when no one saw them. They were just necessary. If you've ever built something while the rest of your life is still demanding everything from you, you know there's no balance. There's only endurance. Year 1 looked like nothing from the outside. 3 clients, all small freight companies. Connecticut, Western Massachusetts. I drove to each one myself, installed the software, sat with dispatchers who didn't trust new systems and walked them through it step by step. No marketing, no website worth showing anyone, just word of mouth. Truck drivers, talking to other truck drivers. That thing saved me time. That girl actually answers her phone. Revenue that first year, $52,000. Not impressive, but it covered Elena's medication, covered rent, kept everything moving forward. That was the goal. Nothing more, nothing less. Year 2, everything shifted. Not dramatically, gradually. 17 clients, then 20, then more. I hired my first employee. Marcus. Remote. Philadelphia. He didn't ask about my degree. Didn't ask about my background. He cared about the code. About the product. That was it. Revenue. $340,000. I moved out of the studio. 1 bedroom. Still small. But the radiator didn't sound like it was trying to start a fire every night. Elena got a new wheelchair. One that didn't make her wince when she sat in it too long. Those upgrades mattered more than anything else. Year 3. It stopped feeling fragile. 80+ clients. 14 states. 6 employees. All remote. Revenue crossed 2 million. I remember staring at that number on my screen. Not celebrating. Just sitting with it. Because numbers don't always feel real when you've spent years being told you're not. A venture firm from Boston reached out, asked if I was raising a round. I said not yet. They said they'd wait. And through all of it, I kept going to Thanksgiving. Every year. Because Elena asked me to. Because she still believed in the idea of family, even when the version we had didn't quite deserve her. And every year. Nothing changed. Still no degree? My mother would say lightly. Meredith just made partner track. So proud of her. And when someone asked what I did, she answered for me. She does some computer thing. Freelance, I think. She never looked at me when she said it. Not once. Across the table, Elena would catch my eye and give me the smallest nod. Not yet. If you've ever had to wait to be seen not because you couldn't speak, but because timing mattered, you understand that kind of patience. It's not passive. It's controlled. And by year 4, everything was about to change. Just not in a way anyone at that table was ready for. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Unknown number. San Francisco. I almost didn't answer. Most unknown calls meant sales pitches, wrong numbers, or people trying to sell me something I didn't have time to listen to. But something made me pick up. "Is this Leah Parker?" the voice asked. "Yes. Hi, this is Daniel Cho from Redwood Equity." I sat down. Not because I was overwhelmed, because instinct told me I needed to. "We've been following Juniper Systems for a while," he continued. "We'd like to talk about a potential investment." For a second, I didn't respond. Not because I didn't understand the words. Because I did. Too clearly. They had been watching. Quietly. The same way I had been building. "I'm listening," I said. That conversation lasted 40 minutes. Not small talk. Not fluff. Questions that went straight to the structure of what I had built. Customer retention. Scalability. Margins. Things no one in my family had ever asked me. Things that told me this wasn't curiosity. It was evaluation. When the call ended, I didn't celebrate. I walked into the living room where Elena was reading. "They want to invest," I said. She didn't look up right away. Just turned the page. "Of course they do." I leaned against the wall. "It's not done yet." "Nothing ever is," she said calmly. "That doesn't mean you're not ready." If you've ever had someone believe in your direction before your destination is fully formed, you know how grounding that feels. 2 weeks later, I was on a red-eye flight to California. Coach seat. Same black blazer I'd owned for years. The one that fit well enough to pass. I didn't upgrade anything about myself for that meeting. I didn't need to. Because for once, what mattered wasn't how I looked walking into the room. It was what I had already built before anyone was watching. The Redwood office sat high above the city. Glass walls, wide windows. The kind of place that makes you aware of how far you've come without anyone announcing it. 3 partners sat across from me. No wasted words. No condescension. No assumptions. They asked questions. I answered them. Not perfectly, but honestly. By the end of the meeting, one of them leaned back slightly and said, "You've done something rare here." I didn't smile. Didn't nod. I just held his gaze. Because praise, when it comes from the right place, doesn't need to be collected. It just needs to be recognized. A week later, they sent the term sheet. $12 million valuation. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I didn't believe it, because I needed to understand it. What it meant. What it changed. What it didn't. I kept 61% ownership. Control stayed with me. That mattered more than the number. I signed it. Quietly. No announcement. No post. No family call. Just another decision made in a room where the only thing that mattered was the truth of what I had built. And back in Connecticut, at dinner tables I still showed up to. I was still the same person in their story. The dropout. The one figuring things out. The one who does some computer thing. Some of you listening have lived this exact split. Where your real life and your public label don't match. Where you sit in rooms where people think they understand you, and you let them. Not because they're right, because they're not ready, and neither are you. Not yet. I kept the name Leah Parker everywhere that mattered. Contracts, bank accounts, press inquiries, anything tied to Juniper Systems. Parker, not Bennett. Not the name my family used when they told stories about me that didn't quite line up with reality. It wasn't about hiding. It was about control. The last time my life had been visible in the wrong way, it cost me an opportunity I couldn't afford to lose. I wasn't going to let that happen again. A few weeks after the deal closed, a small article ran online. Nothing huge. No headlines that would reach my parents' living room. Just a quiet piece in a tech column. Juniper Systems, the logistics startup scaling without noise. They asked for a photo. I declined. They used a stock image instead. A shipping yard at sunrise. Containers stacked in perfect lines. It felt appropriate. Structured. Anonymous. Still moving. Uncle Ray, my mom's brother, wrote a weekly financial newsletter. He had a small but loyal audience. People who cared about markets, patterns, trends. That week, he mentioned Juniper. Just one line. "Keep an eye on Juniper Systems. Founder Leah Parker is doing something interesting in last-mile logistics." He wrote my name. Didn't recognize it. I read that sentence sitting at my kitchen table, Elena across from me doing a crossword. Something interesting, I repeated quietly. She looked up. That's how it starts, she said. Not with recognition. Not with applause. Just with someone noticing. And still, every Thanksgiving I went. Same house. Same table. Same version of me. Still figuring things out? Someone would ask politely. Before I could answer, my mother would. She's taking her time, she'd say with a soft smile. We're just glad she's okay. Okay. That word did a lot of work. It made everything sound temporary. Forgivable. Small. At one dinner, my cousin asked directly, "So what do you actually do now?" I opened my mouth, and my mother spoke over me. She freelances, computer stuff. Like it wasn't worth finishing the sentence. Like I wasn't. Across the table, Elena met my eyes. That same look. Steady. Intentional. Not yet. If you've ever held back your truth in a room that hasn't earned it, you know how much restraint that takes. Not because you're afraid to speak, because you understand timing. Because you know that when the truth finally lands, it needs to land where it can't be dismissed. Year 4 didn't feel different at first. That was the strange part. From the outside, nothing changed. Same routines, same dinners, same quiet assumptions about who I was. But underneath, everything was accelerating. More clients, more states. A team that no longer needed me in every conversation. Systems running without constant supervision. That's when you know something is real. When it doesn't depend on you every second. And then, the first acquisition offer came in. I didn't tell anyone. Not my family. Not even Uncle Ray. Only Elena. We were sitting in the living room. Afternoon light coming through the window. They want to buy it, I said. She didn't react immediately. Just folded her crossword. Do you want to sell? I don't know yet. She nodded once, then don't decide yet. That was her way. No pressure. No direction. Just clarity. Because this was never about proving anything. Not to my mother. Not to that table. Not even to myself anymore. It was about building something real. And deciding what to do with it when it finally stood on its own. And somewhere in the background, without me realizing it yet, another piece of the truth had already been waiting. Quiet. Patient. Just like everything else that mattered in my life. Waiting for the right moment to be seen. Elena called me into her room on a quiet Saturday afternoon. No urgency. No tension. Just that tone she used when something mattered enough not to rush. Sit, she said. She was in her wheelchair near the closet. A shoebox resting on her lap, the same old kind with worn corners and a lid that didn't quite close all the way anymore. I had seen that box before. Family photos. Old birthday cards. Things people keep when they don't need to explain why they matter. She handed it to me. Open it. I lifted the lid. The top layer looked exactly the same as always, but underneath, there was a folded piece of paper. Printed. Clean. Out of place among everything else. I picked it up. Unfolded it. And before I even read the words, I saw the email address. My mother's. Sent to a name I recognized immediately. Paula Reynolds. The hiring manager. Ridgeline Tech. March 14th, 2018. My chest tightened before I got to the first sentence. I'm writing out of concern for my daughter. I didn't need to read the rest. But I did. Slowly. Every word landing exactly where it was meant to. She has a history of unreliability. I would hate for your company to be put in a difficult position. I love my daughter, but I believe in honesty. The room went very still. Not quiet. Still. Like something had been confirmed in a way that removed all doubt. I lowered the paper slightly. How long have you had this? Elena didn't hesitate. Since the week it happened. I looked at her. You knew. She used my computer, she said simply. Forgot to sign out. I printed it before she could delete it. I swallowed. A lot of things tried to surface at once. Anger. Relief. Validation. None of them fully landed. Because what I felt most was clarity. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. She reached over. Placed her hand on mine. Steady. You weren't ready, she said. I frowned slightly. I could have confronted her. Yes, Elena said, and she would have destroyed you. The words weren't harsh. They were accurate. You needed to be standing on your own ground first. She held my gaze. Are you standing now? I thought about everything. The company. The team. The offers. The life I had built that didn't depend on anyone at that table. I nodded. I am. She leaned back slightly. Satisfied. Then you don't need to fight her, she said. You just need to wait. If you've ever held proof of something that hurt you, and realize the timing of when you use it matters more than the proof itself, you understand that moment. I folded the paper carefully, not shaking, not rushing, just deliberate. What do I do with it? I asked. Elena's eyes didn't leave mine. You keep it, she said. And if she ever tries to rewrite your life in front of the people who matter? A small pause. You show them the ink. I took the email with me that day, put it in a safe, made a copy, saved it where no one else could touch it. I told myself I might never need it. That maybe things would stay the same. That maybe the truth wouldn't have to come out like that. But life has a way of lining things up, quietly, until the moment they can't stay hidden anymore. And 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, everything started moving toward that moment. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I stopped by Meredith's apartment, just to pick up a coat I had lent her the winter before. Nothing important. Nothing dramatic. That's usually how turning points begin. Her door was unlocked. I knocked once and stepped inside. Mer? I called. No answer. But I could hear her voice from the living room. On the phone. Speaker on. I was about to walk in, and then I heard my mother's voice. I've invited the Hendersons this year, she said, and Frank's side of the family. About 30 people total. I stopped. Not intentionally. Just instinct. I want everything to be perfect, my mother continued. This is the year Meredith announces her engagement. There was a pause. Then Meredith's voice. Okay. And if Leah starts anything, my mother added, her tone sharpening slightly, I need you to handle it. I felt my hand tighten on the doorframe. She doesn't start anything, Meredith said. She barely talks. Exactly, my mother replied. And it makes me look bad. Like I raised someone with no direction. Silence. Not disagreement. Not defense. Just acceptance. I stepped back. Quietly. The same way I had learned to leave rooms that weren't meant for the truth. I didn't take the coat. Didn't announce I was there. I just walked out. Closed the door behind me without a sound. Sat in my car with the engine off. And for a moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt finished. If you've ever overheard something that confirmed everything you already suspected, you know that strange calm that follows. Not shock. Not even hurt. Just the absence of doubt. Then my phone buzzed. An email notification. Unknown sender. Subject line. Forbes 30. Under 30 feature inquiry. I stared at the screen longer than I expected to. Opened it. Read it once. Then again. They wanted to feature Juniper Systems. Me. Leah Parker. The article would publish. November 27th. Thanksgiving Day. I leaned back in the driver's seat. Looked through the windshield at nothing in particular. I didn't plan that. Didn't orchestrate it. Didn't time anything. But somehow, the truth had chosen the exact same day my mother had been preparing for weeks. The same room. The same table. The same audience. I didn't smile. Didn't feel vindicated. Just aware that something was coming. And this time, I wasn't going to shrink to make it easier for anyone else. I replied to the email that afternoon. Short. Professional. Yes, I'd be happy to participate. That night, Elena noticed something different. Not in what I said. In how quiet I was. You hear something today? She asked. I looked at her. For a second, I considered telling her everything. Instead, I said, something like that. She nodded slowly. Didn't press. She never did. Good, she said. That means it's close. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be understood anymore. I was waiting for the moment when I didn't have to explain anything at all. And that moment was 3 weeks away. Thanksgiving morning felt ordinary. That was the strangest part. After everything that had been building, years of silence, weeks of alignment, a date I hadn't chosen but somehow couldn't ignore, you would think the day would feel different. It didn't. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror at 7:10 a.m. Gray sweater, dark jeans, boots. The same version of me they had seen every year. Unremarkable. Safe. Easy to underestimate. Elena was ready before I was. Already dressed, her coat buttoned. a small tin of homemade cookies resting on her lap like she had been waiting for this day her whole life. "You look the same," she said. "I am the same," I replied. She gave me a look. Not disagreement. Just depth. She said. "We didn't talk much on the drive. We didn't need to. Some of you listening know this kind of silence. It isn't empty. It's full of everything that doesn't need to be said out loud." The house looked exactly the same. White siding, black shutters, cars already lining the street. At least a dozen. I parked, got Elena's wheelchair out, helped her settle in, and together we moved toward the front door. It was already open, warm air spilling out. Laughter, music. That same Motown playlist my mother played every year like it proved something about who she was. Inside, nothing had changed. Aunt Carol by the fireplace. Uncle Frank near the window. Kids running through the hallway. Meredith in the center of it all, smiling, polished, her engagement ring catching every bit of light in the room. And my mother. Perfect. Burgundy dress. Pearls. Every detail placed exactly where it should be. She saw me. Smiled. The kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Leah," she said lightly. "You brought your grandmother. How nice." Then she turned away. Conversation already moving on. Like my arrival had been acknowledged just enough to not be questioned. If you've ever walked into a room where your presence is tolerated but not truly welcomed, you know how quickly you learn where to stand. I pushed Elena toward the table, set her in place. She reached for my hand briefly. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm okay." She held my hand for a second longer. Not checking, grounding. Dinner was called at 4. 31 people. 3 tables pushed together. Everything arranged perfectly. Exactly the way my mother liked it. Exactly the way she could control. And somewhere, quietly, without announcement, phones across that room were already starting to buzz. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just enough. Like something was knocking. Waiting. About to be let in. My mother stood first. She always did. Glass raised. Back straight. Every movement practiced without ever looking rehearsed. "I want to thank everyone for being here," she began, her voice warm, controlled. "This year is very special for our family." She turned toward Meredith. And Meredith? A soft pause. The kind that lets attention gather. "We are so proud of you." Applause. Smiles. Meredith lifted her hand slightly, the ring catching the chandelier light exactly the way my mother had probably imagined it would. "Top of her class," my mother continued, "and now engaged to a wonderful man from a wonderful family." More smiles, more approval, everything in its place. Then, her eyes moved, slowly, deliberately, until they landed on me. "And Leah," her voice softened, tilted, carefully shaped into something that sounded like concern if you didn't listen too closely. "We're just grateful you're here. We keep hoping next year will be your year." A few sympathetic looks. Someone shifted in their seat. Across the table, I saw Uncle Frank look down at his plate. Not disagreement. Just discomfort. It didn't stop her. It never did. "What do you do these days, Leah?" Mrs. Henderson asked from 2 seats down. Polite, curious. I opened my mouth. And my mother answered. "She's still figuring things out," she said gently. "She left college a few years ago." A pause. Then softer. "It's been a journey." The word hung there. Not supportive. Not neutral. Shaped. Designed. Meredith added quietly without looking up. "She's good with computers." A small laugh from someone. Light. Harmless. Dismissive. I set my fork down. Not dramatically. Just done. Across the table, Elena's voice cut through the room. Clear. Steady. "Leah is more than what you've been told." Silence. Immediate. My mother's smile tightened. "Mom," she said lightly, "let's just enjoy dinner." Elena didn't respond. She didn't need to. Some of you listening know this moment. When someone speaks the truth in a room that has been carefully arranged to avoid it, and everything pauses. Just for a second. Just long enough for people to feel it. Before it gets pushed back down. Dinner continued. Conversation resumed. The surface held, but something underneath had shifted. I could feel it. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. Then, a vibration. Soft. From my pocket. I didn't check it. But I saw it happen elsewhere. Uncle Ray glanced at his phone. Then again, his expression changed slightly. Not big, not obvious, just different. Across the table, Aunt Carol reached for hers. Same reaction. Small, contained, but building. If you're listening right now, tell me, would you stay quiet in that moment? Or would you speak? Some of you have been there. You know how heavy that choice can feel. I didn't move, didn't react, didn't interrupt what was already starting to unfold. Because this time, I didn't need to say anything. The truth was already entering the room, and it wasn't asking for permission. After dinner, the room softened into smaller conversations. Coffee, pie, low laughter. I stood near the bookshelf, holding a cup of tea I hadn't touched. Then I heard my mother. "I worry about Leah," she said softly to Mrs. Henderson. "I think she's struggled with some mental health issues." My fingers tightened. "We've tried to help," she added gently. "She refuses." Kind words, carefully chosen, but not kind. I set the cup down and walked over. "Mom, I need you to stop." She looked up. "Leah, you were telling people I have mental health issues." Her expression shifted. "I'm concerned about you." "That's not concern, that's control." A few people went quiet. Then she said it, low, sharp. "If you had done something with your life, I wouldn't have to explain you." The room stilled. From across the room, Elena's voice came. "That's enough." And then, a phone buzzed. Uncle Ray looked down. Froze. "Leah," he said. He looked at me, then back at the screen. "Is this you?" It didn't hit the room all at once. It spread. Uncle Frank leaned in, reading Ray's phone. "Good Lord." Aunt Carol pulled hers out, searched fast. "Oh my God." Screens turned. Faces changed. One by one, Meredith took Craig's phone. "Read." Didn't look up. If you know what it's like to be misunderstood for years, you recognize this kind of silence. My mother stood in the center, watching reactions instead of screens. "What is everyone looking at?" No one answered. My father walked over, held out his phone. She took it, and I watched her face shift. Confusion, recognition, then fear. "This isn't real." "It's on Forbes," Ray said quietly. "And Bloomberg." The room went still. She looked at me. "You built this?" "Yes." "And you didn't tell us?" "You never asked," I said. "You only told people what I wasn't." Silence. Then Mrs. Henderson spoke. "You said she had mental health issues." My mother faltered. "I didn't mean." "You did." Across the room, Craig stepped back from Meredith. Small movement, but clear. Because the truth doesn't just arrive. It rearranges everything. No one rushed to fill the silence. That was new. For years, my mother had always been the first to recover a room, to redirect, soften, reframe. This time, she couldn't. Elena spoke from her chair, calm and steady. "Leah left school to take care of me," she said. "I had a stroke. She was 22. A few heads turned. She drove 4 hours alone in the middle of the night," Elena continued. "And you told everyone she quit because she couldn't handle it." My mother's lips parted, but nothing came out. My father's voice followed. "It's true. Just that. Nothing more." But it landed harder than anything else. I stepped forward slightly. "In 2018, I got an internship," I said. "It was taken away after someone from my family called." I didn't raise my voice. "I have proof." And for the first time, no one looked at my mother for answers. My mother shook her head, but it was slower now, less certain. "That's not true," she said, though her voice didn't hold the same weight. I took out my phone, opened the photo, the email. Dated, signed, clear. I handed it to Uncle Ray. He read it once. Then again, his jaw tightened. "You warned them about her," he said quietly. "You sabotaged your own daughter." Aunt Carol covered her mouth. Uncle Frank leaned back, exhaling hard. Across the room, Meredith finally spoke. "Mom, did you really do that?" No answer. Just silence. The kind that doesn't defend, it reveals. I didn't feel triumphant. Just steady. "I didn't come here to expose you," I said. "I came here to stop being erased. If you've ever had to choose between staying silent or standing in your truth, you already know how heavy that moment is."